Children, how can I help you?
What? Please, sir, can you help us pay our mother's hospital bills?
He stepped outside with irritation etched across his face, like the day itself had offended him. Two small figures stood at the gate, a boy and a girl, twins, thin shoulders pressed together, fear clinging to them like a second skin. Before the guards could speak, the boy rushed forward. "Please, sir," he cried, his voice trembling. "Our mother is dying. We just need help to save her." The man barely looked at them. His eyes skimmed their worn clothes, the hospital papers clutched in the girl's hands, as though he were assessing a problem that needed a fast, efficient solution. "I donate millions every year," he said flatly. "I can't help every sad story." The words crushed the air between them. The boy, Ethan, fell to his knees on the cold ground, pride shattering in an instant. "Please," he begged, tears spilling freely now. "She's all we have." The girl, Eliza, did not cry. She only reached for her brother's shaking hand and held it tight, standing firm beside him, her eyes steady, pleading without a single tear. The man turned away. "This ends here," he said. "Leave." As the gates began to close, Destiny leaned closer. If stories like this move your heart, please subscribe to the channel. Like this video to support emotional storytelling. Comment below, do you believe destiny can never be escaped? Your support helps us bring more powerful stories to life. Early morning light slowly spread across the sky, soft and weak. Dark clouds hung low, heavy with rain, as if the day itself was unsure whether to cry. In front of a luxury mansion, tall iron gates stood closed, cold, high, and intimidating. Security cameras blinked quietly. Guards stood firm. Everything about the place whispered, "This world is not for you." Yet standing there, small and fragile, were two 5-year-old twins. Ethan, the little boy, stood in front of his sister, even though he was barely taller than the gate handle. His face was pale, his eyes tired from too many sleepless nights. Still, he tried to look brave, like he believed standing straighter could protect them both. Eliza, his twin sister, stayed close behind him. She was quiet, her eyes big and watchful. In her tiny hands, she held a brown envelope almost as large as her chest. Inside were hospital papers, bills, test results, and words she couldn't read but had memorized by heart. Ethan whispered, tugging her sleeve, "Lisa, what if this is the wrong house?" Eliza shook her head gently. "No. Mommy said the biggest gate means the biggest help." Ethan looked up at the tall iron bars. "Do you think he'll be kind?" She hugged the envelope tighter. "He has to be. Mommy is waiting." Their clothes were clean but old. Eliza's dress had been stitched at the sides. Ethan's shirt sleeves stopped short of his wrists. Someone had cared enough to wash them carefully, hoping neatness might earn kindness. A guard noticed them and walked over, his boots loud against the stone. "Hey, kids," he said, "softer now. You shouldn't be here." Ethan lifted his chin. "Please, sir. Our mommy is in the hospital. We need help." The guard glanced at Eliza's shaking hands, at the envelope bent at the corners. "This isn't the place," he said quietly. Eliza took one small step forward. "Please," she whispered. "Our mommy is very sick." The guard hesitated. Above them, thunder rolled gently in the distance. The rain had not fallen yet, but the sky was ready. And so was destiny. Eliza clutched the brown envelope tightly against her chest, as if letting go would make everything fall apart. The paper was old and bent, soft at the edges from being opened again and again. Inside were things she did not fully understand but feared deeply. Hospital bills with big numbers, a doctor's diagnosis written in hard words, and a bold red line at the bottom that said, 48 hours remaining or treatment stops. Ethan leaned closer to her and whispered, "Is that the last paper?" Eliza nodded slowly. "Yes. The nurse said this one is important." Their mother lay in a hospital bed across town, her eyes often closed, her breathing shallow. When she smiled at them, it looked painful. When she spoke, it sounded like she was already tired of fighting. The doctors had said the words softly, but the twins heard them clearly, critical condition. They had not come here first. They had gone door to door, holding the same envelope. Some people shook their heads. Some pretended not to hear. Some closed their doors slowly, gently, like it hurt them to say no. Others slammed the doors hard. One woman had whispered, "I'm sorry," and turned away. A man had said, Go home, children. By the time they reached the mansion, Ethan's feet hurt, and Eliza's hands were shaking. Someone on the street had pointed at the tall gate and said, "The man in that mansion is very rich. Maybe he can help." So they came. Before they could speak, a security guard stepped forward sharply. "Hey, you kids can't stay here. Go away." Ethan grabbed Eliza's hand. "Please, sir," he said quickly. "We just want to talk." The guard shook his head. "This is private property. Leave now." Eliza stepped forward, her small voice steady but trembling. She held up the envelope with both hands. "Please, we don't need food," she said softly. "Just help our mommy live." Her words hung in the air. The guard froze. Another guard turned to look. The raised voices, the small crowd, the trembling children, it all caused a stir. And inside the mansion, the man who owned everything finally looked toward the gate. The tall glass doors of the mansion slid open, and Alexander Hale stepped outside. He was in his early 30s, young for someone so powerful. His suit was perfectly pressed, his watch worth more than most houses on the street. People knew his name. Newspapers praised his success. His foundations fed thousands, built schools, saved lives, but always from a distance. He gave money, not himself. He never looked into the eyes of the people he helped. This morning, his face was tight with annoyance. "What is all this noise?" he asked sharply. The guard straightened. "Sir, these children won't leave." Alexander's eyes fell on the twins. Not with anger. Not with kindness. With calculation, like they were a problem he needed to solve quickly so he could return to his life. Ethan felt his chest tighten. He squeezed Eliza's hand. "That's him," he whispered. Eliza nodded, her fingers shaking around the brown envelope. Alexander took a step closer. "Where are your parents?" he asked, his voice calm but cold. "Our mommy is in the hospital," Ethan answered quickly. "She's very sick." Alexander sighed, rubbing his forehead. "I see this every day. Stories, papers, emergencies." He gestured lightly with his hand. "I donate millions every year. I can't help every sad story." The words hit Ethan like a push. "Please, sir," Ethan said, stepping forward. "We don't have anyone else." Alexander glanced at his watch. Ethan's knees suddenly touched the ground. He didn't even realize he was kneeling until he felt the cold stone under him. His small hands trembled as he pressed them together. "Please," he cried. "I'll do anything. Please help our mommy." A guard looked away. Eliza gasped softly. "Ethan." She dropped down beside him, wrapping her small hand around his. She didn't kneel to beg. She knelt to hold him steady. Her voice was quiet but clear. "Sir, our mommy won't wake up anymore. The doctors said there's no more time." Alexander's jaw tightened. He looked at the papers in her hand, then at the children's faces, red eyes, shaking lips, fear they were trying so hard to hide. Still, his heart stayed locked. "This isn't how help works," he said, turning slightly. "There are systems, foundations, procedures." "But she doesn't have time," Ethan sobbed. "She only has 2 days." Alexander turned away fully now. "Take them off the property," he said calmly. "Give them directions to a shelter if you must." The words landed heavier than the iron gate behind them. Eliza held her brother tighter as Alexander walked back toward the mansion, his back straight, his steps firm, unaware that he was walking away from the very fate that had come looking for him. Years earlier, before the mansion, before the guards, before the name Alexander Hale meant anything to the world, there was just a young man with empty pockets and big dreams. Alexander was poor, but he was not weak. He worked long hours, slept little, and believed deeply that one day his life would change. He carried notebooks filled with ideas, plans written in small handwriting, and hope that refused to die. He believed hard work could fix everything. That was when he met Clara. Clara was gentle, but her mind was sharp. She spoke softly, but when she talked about her dreams, her eyes shone. She believed in people, especially in Alexander, sometimes more than he believed in himself. They met in a small cafe near the bus station. Alexander was counting coins, trying to decide if he could afford another cup of tea. Clara noticed and smiled. "You can share mine," she said kindly. He looked up, embarrassed. "I'll pay you back." "You don't have to," she replied. Someday you'll buy me a whole cafe. He laughed. I promise. That promise stayed with them. They talked every night, sometimes sitting on the steps outside her apartment, sometimes walking under dim streetlights, sometimes lying on the floor, staring at the ceiling, dreaming out loud. One day, Alexander said, I'll build something big, something that will change my life. Clara turned toward him. When that day comes, don't forget me. I won't, he said quickly. I'll marry you. We'll build it together. She smiled, resting her head on his shoulder. I don't need big things. I just need you. Late at night, when the world was quiet, they planned their future. A small house, simple furniture, laughter in the rooms, children running barefoot across the floor. Our son will be brave, Alexander said once. And our daughter will be kind, Clara added. He squeezed her hand. We'll name them together. Under the fading stars, with nothing but hope and love between them, they made promises that felt unbreakable. The day Clara told Alexander she was pregnant, her hands were shaking, but her smile was full of light. I have something to tell you, she said softly, pulling him into their small room. She placed his hand gently on her stomach. We are going to have a baby. Alexander froze. A baby, he whispered. Yes, she said, eyes shining. Our baby. For a moment, he smiled. He laughed nervously. He hugged her. But even as he held her, fear crept into his chest. Bills. Rent. Dreams that were still unfinished. A future that suddenly felt heavier. Days later, the call came. A powerful investor had noticed Alexander's ideas. There was an opportunity, big money, fast growth, a chance to escape poverty forever. But it came with a condition. He had to leave immediately. That night, Alexander paced the room. Clara watched him quietly. What's wrong? She asked. This is my chance, he said, running his hands through his hair. The chance I've been waiting for. Clara stepped closer. Then take it. We'll figure everything out. Together. He stopped. I can't take you with me. Not now. Her smile faded. What do you mean? This life, this baby, it's too much right now, he said, avoiding her eyes. I need to focus. Clara's voice trembled. Focus. Alexander, I'm carrying your child. I know, he snapped softly. Then he lowered his voice. I'll send money. I'll take care of things. She grabbed his arm, tears filling her eyes. Don't go. Please. I don't need money. I need you. He pulled away slowly. Love doesn't pay bills, he said. Clara fell to her knees in front of him. Please, she cried. Stay. We can struggle together. Just don't leave us. Alexander stood still, his face hard, his heart torn, but ambition was louder. He placed an envelope on the table. Money. All he had. This will help, he said quietly. She looked at the envelope, then back at him. Our child needs a father, not paper. He picked up his bag. I'll come back, he said, but even he didn't believe it. The door closed behind him, and Clara was left alone, holding her stomach, whispering through tears, Please, don't forget us. But he already had. Alexander had already taken 2 steps away. His hand was on his phone. His mind was already leaving the gate, leaving the children, leaving the moment behind. Just another problem closed, another delay avoided. Behind him, Ethan sniffed and wiped his tears with his sleeve. As he lifted his arm, the loose fabric slid down without him noticing. The guard nearest to them gasped softly. On Ethan's small wrist, just above the bone, was a birthmark. Not a simple mark. Not a scratch or stain. It was a distinctive shape, curved like a small flame folded into a half-moon, rare, unmistakable. Eliza saw the guard's face change. What is it? She asked quietly. Alexander stopped. He didn't know why he stopped. His feet just refused to move. A strange chill ran through him, starting from his spine and spreading to his chest. Slowly, he turned around. His eyes fell on the boy's raised arm. And the world froze. The noise at the gate faded. The guards' voices disappeared. Even the distant traffic seemed to vanish. All that remained was the sound of a single, heavy heartbeat. Thump. Alexander stared. No, he breathed. His hand began to shake. Without thinking, he pulled back the cuff of his own sleeve. On his wrist, same place, same side, was the exact same birthmark. Same shape. Same curve. Same scar-like flame. A guard whispered, "Sir?" Alexander couldn't hear him. Memories rushed in without warning. A woman's laughter. A warm room. A hand tracing that very mark on his wrist. "You and your mark," a voice echoed in his head. "If we ever have a child, I hope they have it too." Alexander's breath caught in his throat. Eliza looked from Ethan's wrist to the man's face. "Sir," she asked softly, "are you okay?" Ethan lowered his arm slowly, confused. "Did I do something wrong?" Alexander took a step closer, his eyes never leaving the mark. Where did you get that?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Ethan frowned. "I was born with it." Alexander's knees weakened. His lips parted, but no sound came out at first. Then, broken and trembling, he whispered the words that felt impossible even as he said them. "That's impossible." The gate stood wide open now, and destiny had finally stepped inside. The sound of the gate creaking softly pulled Alexander back to the present. He blinked hard, like someone waking from a dream he did not want to remember. The image of Clara on her knees, the sound of her crying, the weight of the past, it all rushed at him at once. His chest tightened. His breathing grew uneven. "No," he muttered under his breath. "This can't be real." He straightened his back and clenched his fists. He was not that man anymore. He was Alexander Hale, strong, successful, untouchable. He had buried that life long ago. He looked at the twins again. Small, fragile, waiting. "It's coincidence," he said sharply, more to himself than to anyone else. "Just a coincidence." One of the guards stepped closer. "Sir, the children." Alexander raised his hand. "Enough." He turned away from the twins, afraid that if he looked any longer, the truth might pull him under. His voice grew firm, controlled, the voice he used in boardrooms and meetings. "Take them to the nearest hospital," he ordered. "Pay the bills. All of them." Ethan looked up quickly. "You will help our mommy?" Alexander paused. Just for a second. "Yes," he said without turning back. But quietly. No names. No stories. Eliza's voice was small but hopeful. "Will you come with us?" Alexander's jaw tightened. "No," the guard nodded. "Right away, sir." Ethan squeezed Eliza's hand. "Thank you," he whispered, his eyes shining. Alexander didn't respond. He walked toward the mansion doors, his steps fast, as if distance could protect him. Behind him, the twins were gently led away, their relief soft and fragile. As the doors closed, Alexander leaned against the wall, pressing his palm to his chest. "Impossible," he whispered again, though his hands were still shaking. Outside, the rain finally began to fall. The security guards began guiding the twins toward the waiting car, their small hands still gripping the brown envelope tightly. Ethan looked back at Alexander, fear and hope warring in his wide eyes. Eliza suddenly stepped forward, her tiny voice firm, holding onto his sleeve. "Please, sir," she said, her eyes pleading. "Come with us. Mommy said, if we ever met you, you'd recognize us." Alexander froze, his hands still raised to motion the guards away. His chest tightened. Recognize you," he repeated, his voice unsteady. "Yes," Eliza said softly. "She said you'd know us." The world around him seemed to tilt. His heart beat so fast he could feel it in his throat. He blinked, hoping it was just imagination, but the clarity in her voice, the certainty, made him stumble. He took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. "Wait," he said, voice trembling despite his effort to stay calm. What is your mother's name?" Ethan and Eliza glanced at each other, and then Ethan spoke. His little voice quivering, he said, "Clara." Time stopped. The sound of rain hitting the iron gate, the distant hum of cars, even the guards' whispers, all of it faded. Alexander's knees weakened. His vision blurred. Every memory he had tried to bury, Clara's laughter, her gentle hands, the nights they had dreamed together, flooded back at once. "Clara," he whispered, almost to himself, almost afraid to say it out loud. The name felt like a rope pulling him straight into the past he had run from, straight to the consequences he had thought he could avoid. Ethan and Eliza looked up at him, their faces small but full of hope. "Please," Ethan said, his voice breaking. "She's all we have." Alexander's world collapsed around him. The careful control he had built over his life shattered in an instant, leaving only the raw, undeniable truth. These were the children he had left behind. His past had found him, and there was no escaping it. Alexander sat in the back of the car, the twins beside him. The driver had his eyes forward, the engine humming softly, the city slowly waking outside. But inside, there was a silence so thick it pressed against their chests. Ethan's small hand still held the envelope, folded tightly against his lap. He stared out the window, but his eyes were alert, calculating, braver than anyone his age had the right to be. Alexander studied him quietly. The boy's determination was fierce, like a tiny flame that refused to be snuffed out. Eliza sat close to Ethan, her fingers occasionally brushing his arm, offering comfort he didn't ask for but needed. Alexander couldn't stop looking at her. Her eyes, the shape, the color, the soft, intelligent gaze, were exactly like Clara's. His chest tightened. He had seen those eyes in dreams he never wanted to remember, in hopes he had tried to bury. For a long while, no one spoke. The only sound was the car gliding along the wet streets, the hum of the engine, the soft patter of rain against the windows. Finally, Ethan turned slightly, his small face serious. "Sir, are you rich because God likes you?" Alexander blinked. The question hit him like a stone. He opened his mouth, but no words came. Ethan shrugged slightly, not understanding the weight behind the silence. "Mommy says God helps people who try hard. And you're rich. So maybe he likes you." Eliza glanced up at Alexander, her hands still on her brother's. Her eyes were steady, but there was a quiet plea in them. Alexander swallowed hard. He wanted to explain, to tell them how life really worked, how money and luck and choices tangled together. But he couldn't. Not yet. His throat was tight, and for the first time in a long time, he had no answers that felt good enough. He just kept looking at them, studying every small detail. The curve of Ethan's determined jaw, the way Eliza's fingers intertwined with her brother's, the tiny crease in her forehead when she thought deeply. And somewhere deep inside, he knew that whatever came next, this ride was the beginning of a reckoning he could no longer avoid. The hospital room was quiet, except for the soft beeping of machines. The air smelled faintly of disinfectant, mixed with the sweetness of flowers someone had left on the windowsill. Light filtered in through the blinds, painting stripes across the floor. Clara lay on the bed, her body thin, her chest rising and falling slowly. Her hands rested on the blanket, trembling just slightly. She was weak, so very weak, but she was alive. Her eyes were closed, and for a moment, it seemed like she was just sleeping. Ethan and Eliza stood by the bedside, clutching the brown envelope, holding each other tightly. Their small faces were etched with worry, but also with hope, the fragile kind that had carried them this far. Alexander stepped into the room quietly, unsure where to place himself. He froze the moment he saw her. Time seemed to stretch. He remembered every line of her face, every gentle gesture, every moment they had shared. And here she was, older, weaker, but unmistakably Clara. Clara stirred. Her eyelids fluttered open. At first, her eyes were unfocused, scanning the room as if trying to place every sound and shadow. Then they landed on him. For a long, frozen moment, she just looked. Recognition bloomed slowly, like sunlight breaking through clouds. Tears welled up in her eyes, rolling down her cheeks, not anger, not resentment, just exhaustion and relief. "You," she whispered, her voice hoarse, fragile. "You finally came." Alexander's throat tightened. He wanted to speak, to explain, to apologize, but no words were enough. He just knelt by the bedside, reaching for her hand, careful, reverent. Clara's lips curved slightly, a small, tired smile. "I knew you would," she said softly. "I just didn't know when." Ethan sniffled, clutching Eliza's hand. "Daddy," he whispered uncertainly. Eliza's eyes were wide, glistening with tears. She didn't speak yet, she just watched. Alexander's voice shook as he leaned closer to Clara. I'm here now," he said. "I'll never leave again." Clara closed her eyes briefly, letting the weight of the moment settle. She was still weak, still fragile, but in that instant, with him there, it felt like the first breath of hope in a long, suffocating winter. The room stayed quiet, except for the steady beeping of the machines, the soft rhythm of life, and the gentle murmur of a family beginning to reunite. Alexander sank to his knees beside the hospital bed, his hands gripping the edge as if it were the only thing holding him upright. His chest heaved, and for the first time in years, he could no longer hold back the flood of guilt and pain he had buried deep inside. Tears streamed down his face. He looked at Clara, frail and weak, and then at the twins standing beside her. Their small, hopeful faces mirrored the mother he had abandoned so long ago. "I'm so sorry," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I failed you. I failed them." He pressed his forehead against the blanket, trying to take it all in, the years lost, the pain caused, the nights they must have cried without him. I thought I was doing what was best," he said, voice cracking. "But I was wrong. I was so wrong." Clara's eyes softened. She reached a trembling hand toward him. "Alexander," she said weakly, "you're here now. That's what matters." The twins watched silently. Ethan's small chest rose and fell rapidly, trying to hold back sobs, while Eliza's lips trembled as she gripped her brother's hand. Finally, Eliza's composure broke. A single tear slipped down her cheek, then another, and soon she was quietly crying, her tiny body shaking. "Daddy," she whispered. Ethan knelt beside her, wrapping his arm around her shoulder. "It's okay," he said softly, though his own tears glistened. Alexander lifted his head, looking at them both, his heart breaking with love and regret all at once. "I will never leave you again," he promised, his voice choked with emotion. "I swear to you, never again." For the first time in years, the room felt warm. Not because of the machines or the lights, but because a family, long lost, long broken, was beginning to breathe together again. The doctors' faces were serious, their voices calm but urgent. Alexander listened carefully, his heart tightening with every word. "Her condition is critical," one doctor said, looking at the monitors. "She needs surgery immediately. Without it, we can't guarantee survival." Alexander's stomach twisted. "What about the blood?" he asked, his voice low. The doctor hesitated, then continued. "She has a very rare blood type. Finding a donor is extremely difficult. We may not have enough time." Ethan and Eliza clung to each other. Ethan's small hand found Alexander's, gripping it tightly. "Daddy, can we help Mommy?" he asked quietly. Alexander swallowed hard, looking at his son. The thought of losing Clara, losing the life he had abandoned and finally found again, hit him like a thunderclap. He nodded to the doctor. "I'll give my blood. Whatever she needs." The doctor studied him, then smiled faintly. "It's a perfect match." Alexander's eyes went wide. "Perfect match?" "Yes," the doctor said. "And, if the boy is willing, he also matches. It's rare, but it could save her life." Ethan blinked, looking up at Alexander. "Me? Really?" Alexander bent down, holding his son's shoulders gently. "Yes, Ethan. You can help Mommy live. We can do this together." The boy's eyes widened, a mixture of fear and pride. We can save her." "Yes," Alexander said, his voice steady but trembling. "We will. Together." In the hospital, the father and son sat side by side, needles in their arms, hearts pounding. Their blood flowed slowly, carrying hope directly into Clara's veins. Each drop was a promise, a redemption, a bridge between past mistakes and future love. Ethan watched Alexander's face, saw the tears he tried to hide, and squeezed his hand. "I'm helping, Daddy," he whispered. Alexander nodded, swallowing hard. "I know, son. I know." The machines beeped steadily, a rhythm of life renewed. Healing flowed through the generations, not just from father to mother, not just from son to mother, but through the bond that had survived time, distance, and mistakes. Clara's chest rose more steadily. Her lips twitched into a faint smile, though she was still asleep. Alexander looked at her, then at Ethan, and whispered, "We are saving her, together. Finally, together." In that small hospital room, hope became tangible. Love became visible. And a family, once broken, began to knit itself whole again. Hours later, the tension in the hospital room finally eased. The monitors beeped steadily, the color returning to Clara's cheeks. The lead doctor stepped forward, smiling softly but tiredly. "She's stable," he announced. "The surgery went well. She's going to recover." Alexander's knees, which had been weak with fear, finally gave way as he sank to the floor. Relief washed over him in a wave he had never known. He looked at the twins, who were already rushing forward. Ethan and Eliza wrapped their small arms around him instinctively, holding on as if anchoring themselves to the one person who had been absent for so long. Alexander hugged them back tightly, his tears mixing with theirs. He pressed his forehead to Ethan's head, then kissed Eliza's hair softly. "I can't change the past," he whispered, his voice raw with emotion, "but I will spend my future making it right." Ethan pulled back slightly, looking up at him with wide, trusting eyes. "You promise?" he asked. Alexander nodded, his lips trembling. "I promise. I will never leave you again. Ever." Eliza's fingers squeezed his hand. "We believe you," she said softly. In the days that followed, Alexander worked quickly to make things official. Lawyers were called. Papers were signed. The twins were legally acknowledged as his children. Every signature felt like a promise he could finally keep, a promise not written in paper, but in heart and blood. Once the legal matters were complete, Alexander gently helped Clara into a wheelchair. The children walked beside her, holding her hands. For the first time in years, the family moved together as one. Alexander brought them to the mansion. But it was different now. He opened the doors gently, showing them every room with care. He didn't rush them, didn't overwhelm them with wealth or grandeur. He let Clara move at her own pace, let the twins explore slowly, and made sure they always felt safe, not small. "This is your home now," he said softly, kneeling to meet the twins' eyes. "We'll live here together, but always gently, always together." The children smiled faintly, exhausted but happy. Clara rested against Alexander's arm, feeling the warmth of the family she had dreamed of for so long. For the first time in years, everything felt right. The mansion was no longer just a building of wealth. It was a home filled with love, forgiveness, and a family finally whole. The days turned into weeks, and life slowly found its rhythm. Clara's strength returned bit by bit. She laughed more, her eyes brighter, her hands steady as she cooked small meals in the kitchen, helping the twins with homework. The hospital and fear of loss became memories that still stung, but no longer ruled their lives. Ethan and Eliza began attending an elite school. The uniform was crisp, the classrooms bright, and the teachers kind but firm. Alexander walked them there every morning at first, learning the small routines he had never known, checking lunchboxes, tying shoelaces, listening to their worries about tests and friends. One evening, after a long day, Alexander sat beside the twins on the bedroom floor. Books lay open in front of them, but instead of lessons, he read aloud bedtime stories, his voice slow and careful. Eliza rested her head on his shoulder. Ethan yawned but didn't interrupt, listening with wide eyes as if hanging on every word. Later, when small arguments flared, Eliza upset over a lost toy, Ethan frustrated by a math problem, Alexander learned the humbling art of apology. "I shouldn't have raised my voice," he said once, kneeling beside them. "I'm sorry. Let's fix this together." The twins nodded slowly, surprised and relieved, seeing a man capable of error but also of love. It was during a quiet evening, after Clara had tucked herself into her own chair with a book, that Ethan finally spoke the words Alexander had waited years to hear. They were walking together from the dining room to the study. Ethan's hand slipped into his. "Dad," the boy said softly, looking up at him. Alexander froze. His chest tightened. His legs shook. The word was small, simple, but it carried a lifetime of longing, forgiveness, and hope. Tears welled in his eyes. "Dad," he whispered back, voice breaking. He dropped to his knees, hugging Ethan tightly. The boy clung to him without fear, without hesitation, and Alexander let himself cry, releasing all the guilt, all the pain, all the years of absence. Eliza ran forward and joined the embrace, resting her head against his chest. Clara watched from the doorway, tears streaming down her face, smiling softly. In that moment, Alexander understood fully. This was his family, not in wealth or power, but in laughter, trust, and love. The long years of mistakes, the pain, and the distance all fell away, replaced by the warmth of being called Dad and finally, belonging. The mansion was quiet, unusually so. Only the soft hum of the chandelier lights, the distant murmur of the city outside, and the faint rustle of the evening wind moving through the slightly open balcony doors. Alexander had been awake for hours, moving silently through the halls, checking every detail, making sure every candle was steady, every rose petal perfectly placed. His chest thumped not with fear of the event, but with the fear of the emotions he had tried to bury for years, emotions he now knew were too strong to ignore. Ethan and Eliza were in the adjoining room, their small faces lit with excitement and mischief. They had been Alexander's secret allies for days, helping him plan every step of this surprise. Eliza had insisted on picking roses herself, while Ethan had chosen the music. Both had practiced with him the words he would speak. "Daddy, are you sure she'll say yes?" Ethan asked quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. Alexander knelt beside him, resting a hand on his son's shoulder. "I don't know," he admitted, his throat tight. "But I know I have to ask. I can't let another day go by without telling her how I feel, how I always have." Eliza tugged on his sleeve. "Then hurry, Daddy. Mommy's waiting." Clara entered the grand hall, guided by the twins. At first, she thought it was simply a celebration for her recovery, perhaps a small gesture from Alexander she hadn't expected. But the moment she stepped through the doorway, her breath caught. The hall was filled with soft, warm light from hundreds of candles flickering gently along the floor and walls. Roses, fresh and fragrant, lined the paths, leading toward the center of the room. The soft strains of a piano floated through the air, chosen by Ethan after days of indecision. She paused, her hands pressed lightly to her chest. "Alexander, what is all this?" Alexander stepped forward, his steps deliberate, his eyes never leaving hers. He was dressed simply, but there was an elegance in the way he moved, a quiet confidence that spoke of the man he had become. He took a deep breath, letting his gaze roam over her face, the curve of her lips, the softness in her eyes, the resilience she had shown through years of struggle. Every line, every feature reminded him of all he had lost and all he had finally regained. "Clara," he said softly, his voice trembling just slightly, I have something to ask you." Clara's eyes widened, and she glanced at the twins, who were standing proudly beside her, smiling nervously. Ethan's small hand found hers and gave a reassuring squeeze, while Eliza whispered, "Go on, Daddy, you can do it." Alexander's heart pounded in his chest. He walked toward her slowly, as if each step carried the weight of the years they had lost. "I know I've made mistakes," he began, his voice raw with emotion. "I left when I shouldn't have. I let ambition take me away from the people I loved most. I failed you, Clara. I failed you in ways I can never take back." Tears began to well in Clara's eyes. She stepped forward slightly, her hand brushing against his sleeve. "Alexander," she said softly, her voice breaking, I know you've changed. I can see it." He swallowed hard, gathering courage. "I don't want to waste another moment," he continued, his hands reaching out, trembling slightly as they hovered near hers. "I've spent years regretting the past, and I don't want to spend a single day more without telling you what's in my heart. Clara, will you marry me?" The room seemed to hold its breath. Even the soft flicker of candlelight felt like it had paused in anticipation. Clara's hands went to her mouth, and her eyes brimmed with tears, sparkling in the candlelight. She looked at the twins, then back at Alexander, and her voice trembled as she whispered, "Alexander, are you serious?" Alexander knelt on one knee, looking up at her with every ounce of sincerity he could muster. "I have never been more serious in my life," he said. "I want to spend every day making up for the past, loving you, and raising our family together. I want to be there for you, for Ethan, for Eliza, forever." Ethan and Eliza exchanged glances, then ran forward, surrounding their parents. "Say yes, Mommy." Ethan shouted, his small arms raised in excitement. Eliza nodded vigorously, eyes shining. Clara laughed through her tears, covering her mouth to stifle the sobs that were threatening to break free. She stepped forward, bending slightly so that she could reach Alexander. Her hands rested on his shoulders as she whispered, "Yes, yes, Alexander. Yes, I'll marry you. I knew you would find your way back to us. I just didn't know when." Alexander's eyes blurred with tears. He rose, pulling Clara gently into his arms. The twins hugged around them, small bodies trembling with joy and relief. Alexander pressed his forehead against Clara's, letting the tears flow freely, letting every ounce of regret, longing, and love pour out into that embrace. "I promise," he whispered into her hair. "I will spend every day making it right. I will never leave you again. I swear it." Clara pulled back slightly, just enough to look into his eyes, her own filled with tears but glowing with love. "I believe you, Alexander. I always believed you would come back to us." The twins cheered softly, laughing and clapping. Ethan jumped into Alexander's arms, Eliza onto Clara's, and for the first time in years, the family stood together, whole and unbroken, bathed in candlelight, love, and the promise of a future finally earned. The glow of the candlelight still lingered in the mansion long after Clara had gone to her room to rest. She needed her strength. The twins and Alexander had agreed silently to keep her out of any wedding planning for now. She had endured so much, and Alexander knew that any excitement or stress would only tire her further. Ethan and Eliza sat cross-legged on the plush carpet of the living room, a pile of notebooks, colourful pens, and sketches spread around them. Alexander sank into the sofa beside them, rubbing his eyes wearily but with a small, satisfied smile. "Okay, team," he said softly. "Let us make sure your mommiest wedding day is perfect, but she doesn't have to lift a finger." Ethan's eyes lit up. "We can do it, Daddy. I can help with the flowers." Eliza nodded, serious and organized, already flipping through one of the notebooks filled with drawings. "And I can plan the decorations. Mommy loves roses, so we have to make sure there are plenty." Alexander chuckled, leaning forward to study her sketches. "Wow, Eliza, these are amazing. You've already thought about the colors, the arches, even the candle arrangements." Eliza smiled shyly, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "Well, I remembered what Daddy likes too. I thought maybe you could have your favorite blue in the ribbons." Ethan frowned for a moment, crossing his arms. "I want the cake to be super big. And chocolate. And vanilla too. Both." Alexander laughed, ruffling his son's hair gently. "Chocolate and vanilla. That's ambitious, little man. But okay, we'll make it happen." They spent hours planning, moving furniture around the living room to create imaginary spaces for the wedding ceremony. Ethan grabbed small toys to represent guests, placing them carefully in rows, occasionally rearranging them when Eliza pointed out that the VIP seats should be closer to the front. "Daddy," Eliza said thoughtfully, "we need to make sure there's place for Mommy to sit and feel like a queen." Alexander nodded, feeling a lump in his throat. "Absolutely. She's the most important person there. Everything else is just decorations." Ethan, bouncing excitedly, whispered, "And Daddy, we need music. Music that makes Mommy happy. Can we choose it together?" Alexander's eyes softened. "Of course, buddy. You and Eliza can pick every song. I'll make sure it plays just for her." They moved on to dresses and suits next. The twins were insistent. "Mommy has to wear something soft, not too heavy, so she can dance." Eliza explained. Ethan nodded vigorously. "And Daddy, you need a fancy suit too. Not scary, just fancy." Alexander chuckled again. "I'll take care of that. But it looks like you two are running the fashion department." Ethan jumped to his feet, pulling a sheet of paper from a notebook. "Daddy, we should make invitations too. But let's make them really colorful, and we can draw flowers on them." Alexander took the paper, studying their childish sketches, each one filled with energy and hope. He smiled warmly, brushing a tear that had threatened to fall. "These are perfect. Mommy will love them. She'll never know we planned this all without her, but she'll feel how much love went into every little thing." The twins leaned against him, giggling, whispering ideas and arguing over minor details like where the flower arches should go, which tablecloths to use, and whether to have chocolate fountains or just candy tables. Alexander listened patiently, jotting down notes, occasionally giving them gentle guidance, but mostly letting them lead. By the time they paused for a brief rest, the mansion was filled with the soft hum of imagination and joy. Alexander looked at Ethan and Eliza, his heart swelling. "You two, you've done an amazing job tonight. Mommy's wedding day will be so beautiful because of you." Eliza smiled shyly, leaning against her father's shoulder. "We want Mommy to be happy, Daddy. She deserves it." Alexander kissed the top of her head. "She does, Eliza. And you know what? Seeing you two so thoughtful and loving makes me happier than anything else in the world. We are a team now, and together, we can make her dreams come true." Ethan yawned, exhausted but satisfied, and whispered, "I can't wait for Mommy to see everything." Alexander hugged both of them close, feeling the warmth of the family he had fought so hard to protect. "Neither can I, Ethan. Neither can I." For the rest of the night, they continued quietly, moving from sketches to lists to playful debates over colors and flowers, laughing softly so as not to disturb Clara. Every moment was filled with love, hope, and careful planning, each detail a silent promise to make her feel cherished, to give her the happiest day she had ever known. And as the candlelight flickered across their tired but smiling faces, Alexander realized something profound. This wasn't just wedding planning. It was family, rebuilt, whole, and brimming with love. The morning sun spilled softly through the tall windows of the mansion, painting the walls with golden light. The air smelled faintly of roses and freshly polished wood, the mansion quiet but alive with anticipation. Alexander woke early, careful not to disturb Clara, who was still resting after her long recovery. His heart raced, not with anxiety about business or wealth, but with pure, human emotion, excitement, love, and a twinge of nerves. He walked silently through the hallways to the twins' room. Ethan and Eliza were already awake, their faces bright with energy. The twins had barely slept, excitement keeping them alert, whispering about dresses, flowers, and the perfect way their mother would walk down the aisle. "Daddy," Ethan whispered, bouncing slightly on the bed. "Today is Mommy's big day. Are you nervous?" Alexander smiled, kneeling to meet his son's eyes. "A little," he admitted. "But mostly, I'm just happy. I can't wait to see her smile." Eliza, brushing her hair back with care, nodded seriously. "We have to make sure everything goes perfectly. Mommy must feel like a queen." Alexander chuckled, ruffling her hair. "With you two as my advisors, I think we've got a perfect team." Downstairs, the mansion had already been transformed into a dreamscape. Candles lined the grand hall, the scent of roses and lilies mingling in the warm air. The flower arches the twins had helped plan now stood tall, framing the aisle with delicate petals. Soft music flowed from hidden speakers, notes selected carefully by Ethan and Eliza, songs that would bring a smile to Clara's face. Clara woke slowly, feeling the morning light warm against her skin. She looked out of her bedroom window, seeing the garden filled with blooms. She smiled faintly to herself, unaware of the full spectacle Alexander and the twins had prepared for her. "It feels peaceful today," she whispered, running a hand across the soft blanket. Alexander entered quietly, offering his arm. "Good morning, my love," he said softly. "Are you ready for today?" Clara's eyes twinkled faintly. "I think so, but I don't know what to expect. It feels like a dream already." "Then let's make it a dream come true," Alexander said, gently kissing her hand. The twins were busy helping with the small final touches. Eliza adjusted ribbons along the flower arches, straightening them so they perfectly matched her sketches. Ethan ran between tables, checking on flower arrangements and tiny candle placements, making sure everything was exactly as planned. "Daddy," Ethan called out, voice urgent. "The music. Make sure it starts when Mommy walks in." Alexander nodded, checking his watch. "Don't worry, buddy. Everything is going to happen just as planned." The staff quietly prepared the last touches, placing delicate table settings and ensuring every candle flickered evenly. Alexander walked among them, not as a billionaire commanding attention, but as a father, and a man deeply in love, giving small instructions, smiling at the twins' excitement, and breathing in the anticipation of the day. Finally, the moment arrived. Clara, dressed in a flowing white gown, her hair styled simply but elegantly, was ready. Her veil was light, barely brushing her shoulders, and she looked radiant, fragile yet strong, every scar of the past months softened by the love around her. The twins flanked her, each holding one of her hands. Ethan whispered softly to her, "Mommy, you look perfect." Eliza added, "Daddy would agree too." Alexander, standing at the front of the aisle, felt his heart tighten as he saw her step forward. For a brief moment, he could only breathe, his eyes fixed on her, taking in every detail. The gentle sway of her dress, the soft light catching her hair, the strength in her eyes despite all she had endured. "Clara," he whispered under his breath. Clara looked at him, her eyes glistening with tears. "Alexander," she said softly, her voice full of emotion, "I can't believe this day is real." The twins held onto her hands tightly, walking slowly with her down the aisle. Each step was measured, as if time itself had slowed to honor this moment. The music swelled softly, the notes chosen by Ethan and Eliza echoing through the hall, blending with the soft shuffle of Clara's shoes on the polished floor. When she reached Alexander, he knelt slightly, taking both her hands in his. The world seemed to shrink around them, the candles, the flowers, the music, all fading into a soft glow that focused only on the two of them. "Clara," Alexander said, voice low but steady, trembling with emotion. You are everything I could ever hope for. I failed you before, I abandoned you, and I have carried that guilt every day. But today I promise to spend every moment making you happy. Will you be my wife? Tears rolled down Clara's cheeks as she nodded, struggling for words. Yes, Alexander, yes, 1,000 times yes. The twins squealed softly, hugging both of their parents in a tangle of arms and laughter. Ethan jumped into Alexander's embrace while Eliza clung to Clara's side, all four of them laughing through happy tears. The ceremony continued, simple yet filled with deep emotion. The vows were heartfelt, sometimes shaky with tears, sometimes breaking into soft laughter as they recalled their journey, years of separation, struggle, fear, and finally reunion. Alexander promised love, patience, and presence. Clara promised forgiveness, trust, and partnership. The twins whispered their own little blessings, placing small hands over their parents' hearts during the vows, their innocence and love amplifying the moment. When the rings were exchanged, Alexander slid the band onto Clara's finger with a gentle tremor. Forever, he whispered. Clara mirrored him. Forever. The first kiss as husband and wife was soft, tender, and long. The twins clapped and cheered, laughter echoing through the mansion, mingling with the soft music and the gentle flicker of candlelight. The reception that followed was small, intimate, but radiant with joy. Alexander and Clara danced slowly, the twins joining them briefly, spinning and laughing until their laughter became a melody of the day. There were moments of quiet conversation between Alexander and Clara, small whispers of love and promises, sometimes tears slipping down, sometimes laughter spilling freely. By the time the sun set, painting the sky in gold and pink, the mansion was alive with warmth and happiness. Alexander held Clara close, feeling the weight of the past years lift slightly, replaced by the life they were building together. The twins, exhausted but exhilarated, snuggled close, whispering, "This is the best day ever." Alexander kissed the tops of both their heads. "It's just the beginning," he said softly, voice filled with hope. "The beginning of everything we've ever wanted. Together." And for the first time in years, surrounded by love, laughter, and family, Alexander felt truly home. It had been 2 months since the wedding. Life in the mansion had settled into a happy rhythm. Clara was stronger, laughing more, and the twins were thriving in school, playful and bright. Alexander had grown into his role as a father, learning patience, understanding, and love, while still running his businesses. Everything seemed perfect, almost too perfect. One rainy evening, as the family sat together in the living room, Alexander received a sealed envelope at the door. There was no return address, only his name written in an unfamiliar, elegant hand. The twins were curious, hovering nearby. "Daddy, what is it?" Ethan asked, tugging at his sleeve. Alexander frowned, sensing something off. "I don't know, Ethan, let's see." He carefully opened the envelope. Inside were several photographs and a single folded letter. His eyes widened immediately. The photos showed a young woman holding a baby that looked strikingly familiar. And then he noticed the date, nearly 25 years ago. His breath caught. He read the letter slowly, each word making his chest tighten. Alexander Hale, you thought you had abandoned the past. You thought destiny would leave you alone. But the child you left behind is alive, and they know your name. Alexander's hands trembled as he turned the photos. One of the children held a birthmark identical to his own. Not Ethan or Eliza, but another child, a child he had never known about. Memories he had buried deep surged forward. Clara's grief, the days after he left, the whispers of a secret he had never known about, a woman he had briefly loved before Clara. Eliza noticed his pallor. "Daddy, are you okay?" He swallowed hard, his voice tight. I need to read this carefully." He handed the letter to Clara, who read it silently, her hand shaking slightly. Her eyes met his, wide with disbelief. "Alexander, this can't be true." But the photos told a story their hearts couldn't ignore. Somewhere, hidden for years, was a child who was Alexander's, someone from a past he hadn't even remembered clearly, someone whose existence could change everything. The twins were confused, looking between their parents. Ethan asked nervously, "Daddy, another baby?" Alexander sank into the sofa, burying his face in his hands. Yes, Ethan. It seems. I may have another child out there. And they need me, somehow." Clara grasped his hand, squeezing it tightly. Alexander, we'll face this together. Whatever it means for our family, we'll face it. But Alexander's mind raced. Could he find this child? Could he bring them into a life already filled with love without hurting anyone? And most importantly, how would this revelation affect the twins, Clara, and everything he had just rebuilt? The twist deepened when another envelope slid under the door later that night. This one contained a photograph of the child, now grown, standing in front of a school, holding a report card with the name Hale written clearly on it. A note read, "I've been waiting to meet you. I know you are my father." Alexander felt his heart pound violently, and the twins clung to him. Clara's tears fell freely, mixing relief, fear, and a deep sense of destiny finally catching up. That night, Alexander realized something terrifying and beautiful at the same time. You can escape responsibility, but destiny always finds you, and sometimes it comes with more love and more challenges than you ever imagined. The plot twist left the family with a choice: embrace this hidden child and expand their family again, or ignore the past and live in the safety of the life they had rebuilt. But Alexander knew deep down, he could never turn away again. Alexander sat in the dimly lit study, the envelope spread across the polished desk. The rain tapped softly against the windows, a mirror to the chaos in his mind. Each photograph was a dagger and a key at once, the child's face strikingly familiar, the birthmark identical to his own. Ethan and Eliza sat nearby, their small bodies tense. "Daddy, are you sad?" Ethan asked, his voice trembling slightly. Alexander took a deep breath, forcing calm. "Not sad, shocked, Ethan. Very shocked." Clara entered quietly, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Alexander, we'll get through this. Together." He nodded, swallowing hard. "I need to find them. I need to see them, to make sure they're safe." Eliza looked worried. "But, is it scary? Will they be mad at you?" Alexander shook his head. "I don't know yet, sweetie, but I have to try." The next day, Alexander called in a trusted aide. Using the school photo and report card, he began piecing together the child's life. Every detail mattered: their age, school, hobbies, friends. He asked questions quietly, trying not to let the twins see his anxiety rising. Ethan noticed him pacing. "Daddy, you look like when you're about to do something super important." Alexander smiled faintly. "You're right, buddy. I am." Eliza whispered, "We'll help too, right, Daddy?" "Yes," Alexander said, ruffling their hair. "You two are my secret agents." The mansion buzzed with soft anticipation. Every room seemed charged with a mix of fear and hope, as if destiny itself had entered the halls. Hours later, Alexander found a social media account that matched the child in the photos. He stared at the images, recognizing subtle traits: the curve of their smile, the shape of their eyes. His heart ached with longing and regret. He whispered under his breath, "I can't believe it. You've been out there all these years." Ethan peeked over his shoulder. "Daddy, they look nice. Are they nice?" Alexander's eyes softened. "I think, yes, they are. And I have to meet them carefully. Slowly. So they can know me and trust me." Eliza clutched his hand. "Can we meet them too?" Alexander hesitated, then nodded. "Eventually. But for now, we move slowly. Very slowly." A week later, Alexander arranged a casual meeting near a park, away from cameras and the mansion. The child, now a young teenager, arrived alone, cautious but curious. Alexander's heart raced as he approached slowly, hands visible, voice calm. I'm Alexander Hale," he said softly. "I think I might be your father." The teenager froze, taking a step back. My father? You left." Tears welled up in Alexander's eyes. "I did. And I am so sorry. I have regretted it every single day. I don't expect you to forgive me immediately. I had to find you." The child's eyes flickered with anger, confusion, and curiosity. "Why now?" "Because I can't ignore destiny," Alexander said, voice trembling. "Because I've learned that running away never helps. And because I want to be part of your life, if you'll let me." Silence stretched, heavy with unspoken emotions. Over the next hour, Alexander walked slowly with the child, talking about neutral things first: school, hobbies, favorite foods. He shared small, funny stories about Ethan and Eliza. Gradually, the child's posture softened, curiosity replacing fear. Ethan and Eliza, hidden nearby, watched from a distance, whispering, "They like Daddy. They like him." Finally, Alexander paused, looking at the teenager directly. "I can't change the past, but I can promise that from now on, I will never leave again." Tears fell from the teenager's eyes, and they whispered, I want to know you, but it's scary." Alexander knelt, opening his arms slightly. "I know. We'll go slow, step by step. I just want to be here, if you'll let me." They returned to the mansion quietly that evening. Clara was waiting, nervous but supportive. "Did it go okay?" she asked. Alexander nodded, voice thick with emotion. "It went better than I hoped. They're scared, but willing to try." The twins ran forward to greet their new sibling, laughing and hugging tightly. "We are your brothers and sister." Ethan exclaimed. Eliza added, "We've been waiting for you to be part of our family." The teenager looked between the children, then at Alexander and Clara, and finally allowed a small, hesitant smile. "I think I like this family already." Clara reached out, taking their hand. "Welcome. You're part of this family now, and we'll all figure it out together." Alexander felt a deep sense of relief, though he knew the journey had only begun. He looked at the twins, then at Clara, and finally at his long-lost child. "No more running," he whispered. "This time, we face destiny together."